Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Thank you for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja based event and wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. Today, I'd like to revisit something that I've spoken about before, but it seems to resonate with the crew on the Instagram handle. That's the sales underscore conversation handle, which is where I repurpose some of the things that we talk about over here on the podcast and perhaps toy with some ideas and techniques that I haven't spoken about here before. But in one of the old posts, I put up something about the want, need, afford, and urgency framework that I've discussed here on the podcast. And for those of you who are newbies, catching this as your first episode, that is a framework. It's, how do I put it? Yes, it's a questioning framework of the things that you need to hit to be sure that you're speaking to properly qualified buyers, qualified customers. So you want to ask questions to be sure that they want what it is that you have. Okay, let me make it practical. So I'm a wedding photographer. So I want to be sure that people want a wedding photographer. The kind of wedding photography services that I offer, that there's a need there, because some people don't consider. I mean, for some brides and grooms, wedding photography is a necessity. Of course, traditionally people will say that it's a vanity, and so you can't call it a need per se. But I'm sure you get the general picture. So whether you're a photographer or you're a wedding planner, you want to be sure that they want what you have, they need what you have, they can afford what you have, and that there's a sense of urgency. That means that they have a timeline in view, or there is some other overarching factor that is going to make them pull the trigger and send you that check, make the transfer, pay the deposit quickly so that you guys can get on and start bringing their vision to fruition. So, why do I keep going on and on about want, need, afford, and urgency? One of the reasons why I do so, and something that was picked up by by a wedding planner who came across the post that I put on the Instagram handle. One of the reasons why I harp on it is because you can't even give an accurate or a relevant quote until you have run through this sort of exercise. So if the people do not want or need a wedding photographer of the kind of photography style and budget and what have you that I offer, and same if you're a wedding planner, then if you go ahead and just give a quote, I mean, what are you giving a quote on? How is that quote relevant to them? You haven't asked the questions to know what it is that they want. And a lot of photographers, in particular, do this. People ring up, they say how much, and then they say, oh, it's 250,000 naira for two photographers, one wedding album, 3 frames, and one USB flash drive with a desktop frame or whatever. So I just made that up anyway. So they just go ahead and they just give that spiel and start going into it and trying to convince them or why they should buy. But bottom line is, you didn't get a sense of what it is that they want. You gave a quote for 1 photo book and 3 frames. How are you sure that it's not the other way that they want it? That they want 3 photo books and maybe 1 frame, and you could have quoted higher. So if you don't run through this exercise with your clients, figuring out what they want, what they can afford, and what the sense of urgency is, then you give a quote that is inaccurate and you give a quote that is irrelevant. And then, of course, that you run into trouble later on in the sales process, because it looks like you're trying to take a horse to the water and trying to force it to drink. And of course, you know that that is not going to happen. So why not save yourself the hassle and just make sure that both of you are on all fours in the beginning and just have simple questions. For those of us who are wedding planners, they are already used to the exercise already, because for wedding planners there are lots of moving pieces when it comes to putting a bid together. So wedding planners do not make that mistake of just saying it's 500,000 for the golden package, 1.5 for the platinum package, and 2 million for the whatever. they have that conversation, or at least the wedding planners that I've seen. Okay, how many ushers? How many ushers are you looking at? What's the seating plan? How many tables? What's the menu? How many people are we going to have there? What do we want to have on the drinks, the drink menu? Who are we looking at for MC? Those sorts of questions. It's only after they've been through all that, assuming that your wedding planning agency is a sort of agency that caters to everything, from start to finish. It's only after you've asked all those questions that you can deliver a reliable quote to say, okay, my service fee is 500,000 or 200,000, and for these items, it's X amount, X amount, X amount, everything, all for the grand total of 2.5 million or whatever it is that you charge. I'm just making figures up as usual. So, where was I? Yeah, so bottom line, in order for our quote to be accurate and relevant, let's run through the exercise. Another reason why we should do this is also to eliminate what people in the business to business space call scope creep. So for those of you for wedding planners here, or photographers, or sound and lighting people in particular, for those of you who do work with corporate clients, it's something that you're used to. Now, the idea behind scope creep is that you and the customers get together and you put together a bid on the table, and they say, oh, everything is fine, and then they pay the 500k, and you're feeling all happy, and all is good, all is right with the world. You've already figured out a comfortable profit margin. But then you show up on the day to deliver, and then lo and behold, they say, didn't you bring so and so? And you say, no, that was not part of the contract. When I said 5 ushers, what we meant was actually 5. What we meant was 5 ushers total. Not you would have 5 ushers in the hall, and then there'll be somebody to greet the guests on the way in. If that is what we want to do, then that means we're only going to have 4 ushers in the hall. So if you don't key in on this exercise and really harp on the want and the need part especially, you run the risk of having scope creep later on in the process. And believe me, it is not a fun thing to deal with, because for weddings especially, it can, people have this, how do I put it? Okay, there's this idea about how the wedding ought to be, an idealized version of what it's supposed to be. So there's a lot that is emotionally invested in this idea of a wedding, and so it's not ideally, the wedding day is not the day that you want to start renegotiating all sorts of things, to say that, okay, you got this wrong, we need to look at this, we need to look at that. When we are doing work with corporate clients, it's a little more acceptable, on the day, to say we're going to revisit this, okay, let me just amend the invoice real quick and send it back to you, and then we'll reconcile accounts later. So for corporate clients, that's not a problem. On the wedding day, it's a little bit much more, there's more emotional involvement, and sometimes it can come across as tacky on your part, tacky or maybe pushy. Now, an example of this that I had was back when I did the Total end of year party in Lagos. We provided the photography and video crew. I think that must have been maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe. And so we settled on everything, and really, I should have had the video person on board during the negotiations, because then it would have saved me the hassle of the scope creep that we ran into later on. But anyway, that's in the past. So it was a huge amount, and there was a comfortable margin there for me and for the boys who are going to provide the video and the second and the third shooter. And then we also had a photo booth. So it looked like all was good until we showed up on the day to do the setup. Typically for the video crew at these sorts of things, we have to be there much earlier in order to set up and be sure that everything is working with everything syncs up basically. So be sure that your cameras have the right cords, and they hook up to the projectors okay, and everything. Now, so we get there that day, and then we realize that the people that they got for sound and light, sorry, not sound and light, the multimedia folks, people who bring the screens, basically what they paid for those people were screens only. So between the screen people and we, the camera crew, we had to run around and try and figure out what kind of cabling would be necessary to get that equipment to work. And so there was a bit of a quarrel on the day. Okay, let me not say quarrel. Maybe that's too harsh. There was some disagreement on that day about what was paid to who and what for. Because for us, understandably so, we got the impression that the audio visual stuff was already taken care of. So all we had to do was show up with cameras and then just hook up. And I think for the audiovisual people, the those big screen TVs, I can't remember what they're called. They also had a similar impression. And then lo and behold, we're there that day, and that's the brigade that we had to sort out. And then also the people who brought the cabling and the multimedia stuff did not bring a mixer. And looking back now and speaking to other video people, yes, of course, it seems obvious that these are questions I should have asked. Okay, it's going to be live video coverage, so should we bring a mixer? What kind of system are you guys using? I'm going to make stuff up because I'm not familiar with all the tech stuff. Okay, so is it going to be HDMI? Is it going to be a 3.5 millimeter cable? Blah blah blah, and on and on and on. So, if I didn't get carried away by the huge sums of money, and if I had been ultra professional as I should have, I would have made sure that we had somebody with video competency on ground during the negotiations, so that when we're running through the qualifications, the want and the need part would have accurately tied things down about what was needed. So the mixer would have been factored in, the extra cabling would have been factored in, and what else? I can't remember what other things we had to throw up on last minute. Yeah, so that's it. In fact, rehashing the episode now, I don't even think it would be proper for me to call it scope creep. I guess that's more negligence on my part, or maybe being sloppy on my part. But I think you guys get the general picture. So if you don't key in on qualifying with this simple framework: want, need, afford, and urgency, these are the problems that you have. Your quote won't be accurate. It's not going to be relevant to what it is that they need, and at the end of the day, you're going to be battling with a scope creep. So, thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. Again, I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you very much for all the love and attention on Instagram handle, and then on the podcast. And thanks for being with me so far. And of course, we're looking forward to the first year anniversary of the podcast. I really should check the old episodes and find out exactly when in February we started this journey together. All right, so I'll catch you guys on the next episode. You all have a good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is.